My life felt like a dream come true. It was the kind of profound, quiet happiness that settles deep in your soul, a feeling so serene you whisper a prayer of gratitude for it each morning and each night. I was about to marry Julian, a man who embodied the qualities I had prayed for since I was a young girl. He was not just a prospective husband. He was the man I had pictured for years as a righteous partner. A devoted father to my future children, and my safest haven in a tumultuous world. His character seemed etched with integrity. His faith appeared strong, and his kindness was the cornerstone upon which I believed we would build a family blessed by God. The months of preparation were not about extravagance, but about intention. Every detail of our wedding was chosen with care and meaning. The flowers were simple and elegant. The menu was a celebration of halal. Wholesome food that would honor our guests, and the music was nothing more than the beautiful, uplifting sound of nasheeds and the gentle beat of a daf. We infused the event with small, meaningful details only we understood. A specific verse from the Quran recited during the ceremony, the charity we had both agreed to give in the name of each guest. It was to be a day not of fleeting glamour, but of sacred commitment, a promise made before Allah and our beloved families. The morning of my wedding, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My mother stood behind me, her hands resting on my shoulders, her eyes shimmering with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "You have been blessed." "My daughter," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He is a good man." I saw in the mirror a woman enveloped in a peace I had never known. I was convinced that I was stepping into the life that had been written for me. A life of shared faith and purpose. What I did not know was that this wedding, which was meant to be the cornerstone of my happiness, would instead become the catalyst for my most profound spiritual test. From the very beginning, I knew my journey to the kupa, the marriage canopy, would be incomplete without my best friend Laura Jenkins by my side. She was more than a friend. She was my soul sister. My confidant. We had met at university, two young Muslim women navigating our faith and our futures in a complex world. She was the one who had prayed with me during times of uncertainty, who had fasted with me during Ramadan, and whose understanding of my heart was second only to my own family's. Our connection was a tapestry woven from shared prayers, whispered dreams, and a mutual promise to always hold each other accountable to our faith. Choosing her as my maid of honor was not a decision. It was an instinct, a natural extension of our bond. No one questioned it. Everyone in our community saw the depth of our sisterhood. The day before the wedding, she helped me with my hijab, her fingers gently adjusting the fabric. "You look so at peace, Eleanor," she had said, her voice soft. "I am so happy for you." Her smile was warm, but for a fleeting moment. I saw a shadow cross her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't name. I dismissed it as pre-wedding nerves, a shared anxiety for the momentous step we were about to take. What I didn't know was that behind those familiar, gentle eyes, a secret was taking root, a secret that would challenge the very foundations of my trust and my faith. We had wanted a wedding that reflected our values, intimate, sincere, and close to nature. We found the perfect location, a serene, elegant estate nestled in the peaceful hills of Virginia. It was a place of stunning natural beauty, surrounded by ancient, towering trees and gardens that bloomed with a quiet dignity. The centerpiece was a stately stone manor that felt both grand and welcoming. The main hall, where we would hold our ceremony, had high vaulted ceilings and enormous windows that bathed the space in the warm, golden light of the late afternoon sun. It was there, surrounded by the beauty of Allah's creation and the love of our families and closest friends, that we dreamed of solemnizing our nikah and planting the seeds of our new life together. The atmosphere was one of harmony and barakah, blessing, a sweet, palpable feeling that everything was as it should be, but that same serene place would soon become the silent witness to the most painful collapse of my world. We had rented the entire estate for the weekend, a gift to ourselves and our families, allowing for a prolonged moment of togetherness, shared meals, and joyful anticipation away from the distractions of the city. The night before the wedding, we all gathered on the large patio for a simple, heartfelt dinner. The air was filled with the soft glow of lanterns, the sound of quiet conversation, and the comforting aroma of delicious food. Julian was a calm and attentive presence by my side, engaging my father in deep discussion and making my mother laugh. Laura was, as always, my shadow, ensuring my cup was always full, my plate always had the best pieces of fruit. Her laughter a familiar and comforting sound. She was the picture of a supportive, loving sister. No one, least of all me, could have suspected that beneath that tranquil surface, a storm of betrayal was brewing. A test from Allah that would reshape all our lives. That night, I went to bed with a heart so full of gratitude, it felt like a physical warmth in my chest. I lay in the quiet darkness, mentally replaying the blessings of the day. The sound of my father's voice making dua, supplication for us. The way Julian had respectfully sought my mother's advice. The feeling of Laura's hand squeezing mine in solidarity. I was convinced, with every fiber of my being, that I had found my nasib, destiny. I fell asleep with a verse on my lips, picturing the moment I would walk toward my future, my heart and faith intact. The next morning, the first light of Fajr dawn prayer streamed through my window, painting the room in hues of soft gold. I woke with a profound sense of calm and purpose. Laura was the first to enter my room, carrying a tray with dates and milk. A sunnah, tradition of the Prophet we had wanted to honor. For the bride, she said, her smile wide and, I now see, perfectly crafted. I felt a surge of love for her, for this moment, for the alignment of my world. I felt secure, excited, and deeply blessed. I could not have known that the reality I was living in was an illusion, a beautiful mirage hiding a painful truth. When it was time, my father took my arm. His eyes, usually so composed, were glistening with emotion. Allahumma barik, may Allah bless you, my daughter, he whispered, his voice rough with love. We walked slowly toward the garden where the ceremony was to be held. The air was sweet with the scent of jasmine and roses. The gentle, melodic recitation of the Quran filled the space, and as I walked, I saw the faces of our loved ones, smiling, tearful, their hearts open. It was a scene from the most blessed of dreams, and there he was, Julian, standing under a simple, floral-adorned arch, his posture straight, his face illuminated by a gentle smile, his eyes, which I believed held the light of faith and kindness, were fixed on me. I walked towards him, my steps steady, my heart whispering prayers of thanks, convinced I was taking the most important and beautiful step of my life. My father placed my hand in Julian's. A symbolic gesture of his trust and blessing. Julian's hand was warm, his grip firm. No one in that blessed gathering could have seen that my Kabul, I accept, would be the beginning of my greatest heartbreak. The Imam, a man with a voice that carried the weight of wisdom and peace, spoke of the sacredness of marriage in Islam, of the mawadda wa rahma, love and mercy, that should exist between husband and wife, and of the marriage contract as a solemn covenant. His words resonated in the deepest chambers of my soul. When he asked if I, Eleanor, accepted Julian as my husband, I did not hesitate. My voice was clear and steady as it rang out. Kabul, my eyes. Full of trust and commitment, were locked on his. He smiled back, and when it was his turn, he also said, Kabul. But for a single fleeting moment after the word left his lips, I saw his gaze shift. It was a quick, almost imperceptible glance away from me, towards the wedding party where Laura stood. I dismissed it instantly. Was it shyness? Nerves? Of course, he would be feeling the weight of this sacred moment. The ceremony was concluded with prayers for our union, and we were showered with blessings and good wishes from our families. In that instant, as we accepted the congratulations of our loved ones, I believed our bond was sealed in the most profound way possible. Through faith, the celebration that followed was warm, joyful, and filled with a sense of community. Long tables were set under the open sky, and the atmosphere was one of sincere happiness. There was laughter, heartfelt advice from elders, and hugs that felt genuine. Julian moved among our guests, the gracious host, his smile ever present. But as the evening wore on, I began to notice a subtle change. His attention seemed divided. When I tried to catch his eye, to share a moment of quiet understanding, his gaze would often be elsewhere, distant. I saw him in deep, intense conversation with Laura on the periphery of the garden, their body language speaking of a shared secret. I pushed the unease down, attributing it to the overwhelming nature of the day, to the many responsibilities on his shoulders. I was determined to hold on to the barakah of the day. My father stood to give a speech. He spoke emotionally of the little girl I was, of the woman I had become, and of the respect he had for Julian. I see in him a man of principle, he said, his eyes finding mine. I am at peace, knowing my daughter is in his care. Everyone raised their glasses of sparkling juice in a toast. Julian stood and raised his, a smile on his face, but it was a smile that did not reach his eyes. It was a performance, an empty gesture that left a cold, hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. I looked at him, trying to find the sincere, God-fearing man I had agreed to marry, but all I found was a strange, impenetrable silence in his gaze. I told myself I was being overly sensitive, creating problems on a day of blessing. But deep down, a small crack had begun to form in my heart. After the last of the guests had departed or retired to their rooms, we finally went up to the suite that had been prepared for us. It was a warm, elegant space we had decorated with simple flowers and soft lantern light. Wanting our first evening as husband and wife to be one of peace and shared gratitude, my heart was full, looking forward to the quiet companionship, the shared prayers, the beginning of our life as a team. Julian walked in, and immediately the atmosphere shifted. His movements were brisk, practical. He placed his watch on the nightstand with a definitive click and let out a heavy, weary sigh. The sound was so jarring in the peaceful atmosphere we had created. I went to him, wanting to bridge the sudden distance, to perhaps suggest we pray Maghrib together. That's when I heard it. "I need to be alone with my thoughts tonight," he said. His tone was dry, flat, and devoid of the warmth that should have filled this moment. He didn't look at me. He didn't suggest we share in the evening prayer. He simply took a spare blanket and pillow and walked towards a small, separate sitting area in the corner of the room. "I will sleep here. Good night." I stood frozen, my hands falling limply to my sides. Was he unwell? Had the stress of the day been too much? But when I looked at his face, his expression was closed, distant. There was no trace of the companionship I had expected. He had created a physical and emotional gulf between us without explanation. He turned off the main light, plunging the room into the soft, lonely glow of the lanterns, and turned his back to me. I sat on the edge of the large bed, the silk of my gown whispering against the sheets. I didn't know what to do. I felt invisible. My presence an inconvenience on what was supposed to be the first night of our shared life. I waited in the heavy silence for a word, an explanation, a gesture, anything. But all I heard was the sound of his quiet breathing from across the room. I slowly lay down, unable to hold back the hot, silent tears that streamed into my pillow. I tried to cry without a sound. Not wanting to seem weak, not wanting to disturb his thoughts. The room still smelled of the fresh flowers, but inside my chest a beautiful dream was withering. And that is how I spent my first night as a wife. Alone, confused, and with a spirit that felt fractured, I stayed awake for what felt like an eternity, staring at the patterns of moonlight on the ceiling, making dua for understanding, for patience, for the strength to face whatever test this was. At some point, sheer exhaustion pulled me into a fitful sleep. I couldn't have been asleep for more than 30 minutes when a muffled sound jolted me awake. I sat up, my heart pounding, disoriented. I turned my head. Julian's corner was empty. A cold dread, sharper than any fear, trickled down my spine. I got up, my bare feet meeting the cold floor. I walked to the door and opened it with painstaking slowness. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint moonlight from a large window. And then I heard it again. The sound of hushed, intense whispers. They were coming from down the hall. I forced myself to move, my body trembling. And that's when I realized which room it was coming from. The room belonging to Julian's mother, who had retired early with a headache and was supposed to be resting. My mind recoiled from the implication. What was Julian doing there in the middle of the night? What urgent matter could not wait until morning? I stalked in front of the door, my hands shaking uncontrollably. From inside, the whispers continued. Low, urgent, and intimate. I closed my eyes, praying I was wrong. But I recognized her voice instantly. It was Laura. There was no doubt. Her voice, though hushed, was unmistakable. It was the same voice that had recited Quran with me, that had shared her hopes and fears. Now it was laced with a confidential intensity that felt like a violation of every trust we had ever shared. I felt a sharp, visceral blow to my chest. I leaned against the wall for support. Dizzy and nauseous, everything we had shared, the years of friendship, the shared faith, the promises to be spiritual supports for one another, all of it crumbled to dust in an instant, destroyed by the secretive sounds coming from that room. And then I heard his voice, Julian's deep, familiar voice, whispering her name with a softness he had deliberately withheld from me all evening. Laura. The ground. The ground disappeared from under my feet. It was the voice of my husband, the man who just hours ago had entered into a sacred covenant with me before God. And now he was there, in the dark, sharing whispers and secrets with my best friend. Creating a private world from which I was explicitly excluded. The tears came then, a silent, hot flood, but I didn't make a sound. I rested my forehead against the cool wall, my entire body shaking. Feeling smaller and more alone than I ever had, I found it impossible to reconcile this scene with the sacred ceremony that had just taken place. How could this be happening? Here in this blessed place? On this night of all nights, every hushed word was a betrayal not just of me, but of the vows we had made. And still, I didn't move. A strange, cold resolve settled over me. I would wait. I would not run. They would have to face the consequence of their actions. Time lost all meaning. Each minute was an eternity. I closed my eyes, opened them, and I was still there, a silent sentinel of my own devastation. Finally, the whisper ceased. I straightened up, wiping my tears, my body tensing. The door opened suddenly, and Julian stepped out. He looked startled, his eyes wide with panic, the moment they landed on me. He froze, the guilt plain on his face. He didn't say a word. And then she appeared. Laura emerged from behind him. When her eyes met mine, she froze, her face draining of all color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Unable to speak or even pretend, I didn't need any more proof. The image of the two of them, caught in their secret council, their faces etched with guilt, was more damning than any confession. And still, I found my voice, a broken whisper. Why? I stood my ground, blocking their path. How could you do this? I asked, my voice gaining a shred of strength. What is this on our wedding night? Julian was the first to break. He looked everywhere but at me. Eleanor, it's not what you think, he stammered. We were just talking. Laura was upset. I was offering counsel. His lie was so transparent, so pathetic that for a moment the pain was eclipsed by pure disgust. How could I have agreed to marry a man who would offer such a hollow excuse in the face of such a blatant breach of trust? Laura didn't speak. She just looked at the floor as he continued to weave his flimsy story. I heard enough, Julian, I said, my voice now eerily calm. I heard the secrecy in your voices. I do not need to hear more. Your presence here with her at this hour has told me everything I need to know about your commitment to our marriage. The fight seemed to drain out of him. His shoulders slumped. When he looked at me, there was no remorse, only a weary resignation. Our connection, it's complicated, he admitted in a low voice. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't explain. He just offered a vague, cowardly justification. As soon as the words left his mouth, Laura burst into tears. They were loud, messy sobs. I'm so sorry, Elle. I never meant for this to happen. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Her crying didn't move me. It was too late for her tears. For years, she had been my spiritual sister, and she had betrayed that sacred trust without a moment's hesitation. The friend I had known was gone. I felt the final piece of my old self break apart. My legs were weak. My chest was a cavern of fire. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried up, replaced by a mute. Dry, all-consuming disappointment. My marriage was a lie before it had even begun. My friendship was a fiction. I turned my back on them walked back into our suite, and with a surreal sense of detachment. I gathered my things. I didn't change out of my wedding gown. I picked up my purse and my prayer rug and walked out. No one followed me. No one called my name. I walked out into the cold, dewy garden. The damp grass soaking the hem of my dress. I ignored the chill. I just walked, my bare feet carrying me away from the house of lies, my head held high despite the devastation inside. I just wanted to get away, to find a space where I could breathe and pray, and so I left, without a goodbye, without an explanation, with a heart in ruins, but my faith in Allah, my ultimate judge, still intact. I walked for hours with no destination. My stained wedding dress, a bizarre sight in the pre-dawn darkness. The roads were empty. It was as if the world had paused for my private sorrow. I eventually found a small local masjid. I entered its quiet courtyard, unrolled my prayer rug, and finally, in the presence of my Creator, I wept and poured out my heart in sujood. I prayed for strength, for guidance, for the patience to endure this test. When the sky began to lighten, a sense of closure and exhaustion pulled me back. I returned to the estate, my body aching, my soul numb. The estate was still and quiet, a cruel mockery of the peace that should have been. I entered through a side door, feeling like a stranger. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to speak the truth. They did not get to control this narrative. The dining room was a scene of tranquil normalcy that made my heart ache. My parents, my in-laws, they were all there, chatting over breakfast, their faces relaxed and happy. They were oblivious. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them. Then I quietly wiped my face, took a deep, steadying breath, and walked in. "Could I have everyone's attention, please?" I asked, my voice firmer than I expected. The chatter died down. All eyes turned to me, confused. My father looked up, his smile fading as he took in my appearance, the ruined dress, the bare feet, the hollow look in my eyes. My mother stood up immediately, her hand flying to her chest. "I need everyone to gather in the main living room," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I have something I need to say." One by one, in a confused and murmuring procession, they filed into the living room. My eyes scanned the room. Julian and Laura were absent. Their cowardice was a confirmation in itself. As everyone settled, I stood before them. I thanked them, no voice clear and steady, for sharing what should have been the most blessed day of my life. And then, without a single tremor, I told them the truth. Last night, I began, my gaze sweeping across their faces. After the celebration, I discovered my husband, Julian, and my maid of honor, Laura, together in his mother's room, deep in a private and secretive conversation that violated the sanctity of our new marriage and the trust of our friendship. Their actions have broken the covenant we made. A collective, sharp intake of breath filled the room. I heard murmurs of disbelief, saw brows furrow in horror. My mother's hand tightened over her mouth. My in-laws looked down, their faces pale with shame. No one said it wasn't true. They all knew my character. In the ringing silence that followed, I made my announcement. "I intend to seek an annulment of this marriage," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "I want nothing more to do with Julian or Lona. I ask for your understanding and your prayers. I didn't want their pity. I wanted their respect for my decision." My father was the first to move. He stood up, crossed the room, and wrapped me in a silent, fierce hug. It was a hug of solidarity, of pride. No one protested. As I pulled away, I heard my mother-in-law begin to sob quietly. My own parents had red-rimmed eyes, not from grief for the lost marriage, but from a furious, helpless anger. I felt like I was leaving behind an entire identity, and in the middle of it all, I turned and walked out. I left the estate without a single backward glance, taking nothing with me but my dignity and my trust in Allah's plan. A white dress was now a symbol not of a beginning, but of a test I had endured with my faith as my shield. I walked to the main road, my head held high like someone who has weathered a storm by holding fast to the rope of Allah. I didn't answer the flurry of calls and messages. That chapter was closed. When I got home, I didn't allow myself to collapse. With a soul that was still raw, I contacted a knowledgeable scholar and a lawyer. I sought an annulment on the grounds of deception and a fundamental breach of trust. I refused to see Julian again. I was not the same woman who had said Kabul at that ceremony. That woman was gone, replaced by one who had seen the Qadr decree of Allah and was determined to walk through it with patience and grace. The weeks and months that followed were a journey of deep spiritual healing. I was told that Julian and Laura had begun a public relationship, justifying their emotional betrayal as a deeper spiritual connection. I made dua for them, that Allah would guide them to righteousness, and I focused on my own path. I turned to the Quran, finding solace in its verses. I immersed myself in my work, not as an escape, but as an act of worship, striving for excellence. I surrounded myself with righteous, supportive sisters from my community. The all-consuming sadness gradually gave way to a hard-won, profound inner peace, a sakina that can only come from Allah. I discovered that my happiness and worth were not tied to any human being, but to my relationship with my Creator. For the first time, I felt a deep, unshakable contentment in who I was as a Muslim woman. My small business, a modest abaya design studio, flourished with Allah's blessing. It became a success through word of mouth. A project built on honesty and quality. I opened the second location, then a third, but I wasn't looking for recognition. I was building a life of purpose and independence, a life that was pleasing to God. And no one could ever take that away from me. 3 years passed. My life was different now, serene, solid, and rich with faith. The memory of that night no longer held pain. It was a part of my story, a testament to Allah's mercy and my own resilience. I had learned the profound difference between being alone and being lonely, and I was content in the company of my Lord. It was when I had fully submitted to His plan. When I was no longer seeking a partner, but seeking His pleasure, that the most beautiful blessing arrived. I was at a community fundraising dinner for a new Islamic school. A man approached me, accompanied by his sister. His name was Yusuf. He was calm, his demeanor respectful and grounded. He didn't offer empty flattery. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about my work and my thoughts on the project we were supporting. Demonstrating a deep and sincere mind, our conversation, always with his sister present, was easy and meaningful. I didn't feel a dizzying spark. I felt peace, a sense of rightness, and I knew this was a door Allah was opening. With Yusuf, everything was different from the very start. Our interactions were always chaperoned. Our conversations were filled with mutual respect, shared Islamic values, and a desire to know each other's character and deen, religion. There was no rush, only a calm, steady certainty that this was a path we were exploring with the intention of pleasing Allah. He didn't try to fill a void in me. He recognized a wholeness I had found in my faith and expressed a desire to build a family upon that same foundation. Slowly, with istikhara, prayer for guidance, and the involvement of our families, a bond of respect and admiration grew. It wasn't a frantic emotion. It was something far more profound and enduring. It was trust in his character and his faith. We married in a simple, blessed nikah ceremony at the local masjid. Our home is now filled with the sounds of Quran recitation, the laughter of our two beautiful children, and a peace that is truly a gift from Allah. The love I share with Yusuf is not a dramatic passion, but a deep, tranquil river of mutual respect, shared responsibility, and a joint commitment to raising our children in the way of Islam. I never saw Julian or Laura again. I heard their relationship, built on the broken trust of others, was fraught with arguments and a lack of the peace they had sought, and it eventually ended. I pray for their guidance and their happiness in the hereafter. My story is not one of a broken romance, but of a preserved dignity and a strengthened faith. It is a testament that the greatest love is the love and contentment you find in your connection to Allah. And from that place of strength and submission, He, in His infinite wisdom and mercy, can grant you a companion who is a true protector and friend, making your life a beautiful, peaceful dream come true. Not by the world's standards, but by the standards of Jannah.